Hello and welcome back to the We Are Careers show, and hope you're having a wonderful week wherever you are in the career sphere. Sabiha, how is your week looking this week?
Oh, it's been a bumper pack week. I keep forgetting it's Wednesday. I keep saying to people it's Tuesday, so that's where my mental brain is at the moment. And speaking of a bumper week, we have got a bumper guest for you today. Oh my God, I can't wait to get into this conversation with Catherine, and you're going to be learning more about who we've got in store for you today. I just want to give a warm welcome to our first time viewers, as well as our regular viewers as well. But if you are new for the first time and you're watching the show, just a reminder, we are now on Spotify as well as YouTube, and the We Are Careers show is your fortnightly go-to for career professionals working within the UK market and beyond who want to improve and enhance your continuous professional development by finding out the latest issues impacting the career development sector. And today's going to be a very topical show because you're either going to agree with what we have today or maybe you're going to have a different opinion altogether. And each show, and why we create these shows is so that we can bring the latest updates in the sector to keep you well informed. Plus, we bring you an inspirational guest based on topics that matter to you. The aim is really simple. It's to connect and build a strong community of career professionals so that we can serve our clients in the best possible way. Now, for those of you that don't know me, I'm known as MeetSabiha, and I help international job hunters stop struggling and start thriving. And as always, I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Chris Webb. So Chris, I've kind of alluded a little bit, today's topic is going to be definitely divisive potentially. What have we got coming up in today's episode?
Well, I think it's a topic, I guess, that just doesn't get enough airtime. Let's be honest. So, at time of recording this, we're on 21st of August. So we're just kind of seeing that sort of A-level, T-level, BTEC level 3 vocationals in the rear view. We've also got GCSE results coming up and other kind of BTEC vocational qualifications coming up. And so it's that kind of time of year where really everyone's thinking about destinations, results and destinations. What happens next? And this is why today's topic is really going to focus on a pathway that we definitely feel doesn't feature enough in conversations or in kind of career conversations, and that is the gap year. So to kind of help us bust a few myths around this subject, talk a little bit about, what do we really mean by a gap year kind of in 2024, what does that look like? And to explore what kind of different gap year options really look like in practice. We're delighted to be joined by Catherine Birkett from Yipiyap. So Catherine, very warm welcome to the podcast, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thank you all. Thank you ever so much for having me here today. It's an absolute delight to be here. So yes, as you say, I am Catherine Birkett. I am the co-founder and chief operating officer at a company called Yipiyap. My company specialises in supporting and employing young students who are taking a gap year between A-levels and before they go to university. And we place them into school for that gap year. We put them back into school to support other young learners on a one-to-one or small group basis. This is an absolutely fantastic opportunity for them to work alongside professionals, to get fantastic professional experience and to develop themselves both personally and professionally through that year out. So that's it in a nutshell.
I love that. And speaking of sort of kind of professional development, one of the things that we always like to do, Catherine, and for those of you folks who are familiar with the show, is we love to celebrate sort of good stories that are happening within our sector and beyond, just because there's so much doom and gloom out there already at the moment. So what we want to do is take a moment in our day to sort of really celebrate innovation, inspiring members of the careers community, or simply giving a shout out to something positive that's happening in the careers world. So Catherine, let's start with you. What is your careers cheers for this week?
Oh, I love this. I love this section. So I would definitely say this is all to do. I'm going to ambush it for Yipiyap, if you don't mind. And it's all to do with the fantastic year 13, heads of year 13 and careers leads that our regional directors work with throughout the year to provide our opportunity to their students. They open the door to this opportunity and give their students a real insight into an option, which, as you said at the beginning, is quite divisive, and not everybody agrees with a gap year, and certainly where pressures are on those people to get students into university, having the insight into this to say, actually, this isn't going to, university isn't going to suit everybody, so we need to provide more options. So it's those people that open their doors to us. They invite us in to do presentations, to do clinics, to do interviews in the schools, provide references, and really support us in making sure the right people come forward for the gap years with us. And they are absolutely fantastic. They give their time freely to us and work really closely with us through that year. So it's a massive shout out to them.
I love that. And I love the fact that you're sort of kind of embracing that it isn't just one person that's part of the career conversation jigsaw piece, that there's many elements and many layers to that, Catherine. So I really appreciate that. Chris, what have you got in store for us today?
Yeah, mine's kind of linking back a little bit to the intro, I suppose. So my careers cheers really is to all the careers professionals who've been involved with results days across the month of August. So whether that was kind of Scottish Nationals or Highers a little bit earlier in August, whether it was kind of last week's T levels, A levels, BTECs, or whether it's the results days taking place tomorrow at time of recording for the kind of 14 to 16 qualifications. It's really just a massive shout out to say I've worked those type of days myself. They can be really stressful for both the young people involved, but also parents, carers, educators, people who've really kind of been by their side, throughout the time they're taking those qualifications. So I think careers professionals can really make a difference, in my experience, on those particular days, just helping people to kind of process the outcomes of the results and what the next moves look like. As Catherine said, whether that is kind of going on to post-16 college, whether it is going on to university, apprenticeships, whether it's going on to a gap year, having somebody there impartial, qualified to be able to help you work through that, in my experience, is really valuable. So big shout out to everyone who's involved in providing that type of support.
Oh, I love that. And do you know what? I was kind of going to give a similar message, but that would sort of be a cop-out because we're on that theme. So what I'm going to actually focus on is I'm going to take this step a little bit to the next layer and sort of really focus in on our own, what's the word I'm looking for? Our own sort of personal development in terms of how do we, as Chris mentioned here, for those folks, for those career professionals who are in the depths of what is happening right now in supporting and serving their clients, sometimes that can impact us as career professionals. And so I want to give a shout out actually to Dr. Helen Cooper, who is going to be running a expert workshop, and it's coming up in a couple of weeks' time on Wednesday, the 11th of September at 10 a.m. And you can access this by going onto the CDI website. And the reason why I'm giving her a shout out is she's talking about nurturing hope in careers. And as so many of our community that we're going to be folks that are professionals that are serving, there's going to be elements of where people aren't going to necessarily have the choices that they thought that they were going to have based on the results that they have now received. And so how do we navigate that as career professionals? And the great thing about this workshop, this expert workshop, is it's about nurturing hope in careers, but it's being done virtually. So wherever you are in the UK or in the world, you can access this. And what Dr. Helen Cooper is going to be talking about is recognizing that hope plays a central part in both therapeutic and career coaching settings, and what that can look like for yourself as a career professional, but also for the community that you are serving as well. So for anyone who is working in that space, within the career space, a big shout out, but definitely there is that workshop coming up as well. So that's who I'm giving a shout out to. Now, Chris, we want to dive into today's topic. So what is the theme of today, and what is our guest, Catherine, going to be helping us to debunk?
Well, yes, exactly. So we've got quite a big theme, which is obviously gap years in general. But I guess, Catherine, the first question, and probably the most important question, is, do you feel that term of gap year is kind of still fit for purpose in 2024? And I guess if not, why might it not be?
Well, to be quite honest, Chris, I think gap years are more relevant than ever. And, quite simply, provided they are taken purposefully, that is. They started back in, the 1950s when, it was post-war Britain coming out of austerity. People wanted to sort of sample new cultures and spread their wings a little bit. And they started at that point. And it was very much the preserve of those that could take a year out and those that had the means to take time out of life. That developed into more of an industry, and by the 1970s, we had organisations like Operation Rally that were really sort of providing a structured gap year for people to take. But again, it was still that preserve for those that could. But panning forward 50 years, I can't believe it's 50 years since 1970, but panning forward 50 years, so much has happened. We've got the internet, mobile phones, everybody's connected. We've got tuition fees, the dawn of tuition fees, the trauma of the pandemic. The world is a very, very different place to where we were, and the landscape for young people has changed considerably. So gap years, whilst they still do have a way of making people pause, particularly parents, I think. The thought of taking out a year from your study, from your life, from your journey is quite still a challenging concept. But with everything that's happened in the past few years, that traditional view of gap years as being something quite exotic and not quite what we do has completely diminished. And gap years are really changing. Heads of six and careers leads are really instrumental in making this change. And, I really thank them for this, because they are the ones at the coalface that recognise the need in their students for that option. University is not the natural step for everybody. Some people, it absolutely is, but for others, for whatever reason, it might well be that, they've not quite got their results at A-level and they need to resit. It might well be they didn't get their first offer and they just don't want to settle for second best. It might well be that they just need to press refresh and take a year out to get themselves back on track. But those people really recognise the need for this for many of their cohort. And this is what's driving it. I think it's been really demonstrated in how we've been recruiting over the past 12 years. And even in this 12 years, we've seen a massive step change. When we first started with our 2 tutors in that very first year, the thrust was people who didn't get into Oxbridge, people who didn't get into medicine, wanting to take a year out to do something that was going to stand themselves out from the crowd. That was by far the majority of people who applied to work with us. That was their rationale. Come to this last couple of years, and by far the majority are people who are wanting to take a break and wanting to just take that year out to either get their result grades under their belt, to reapply to their universities of choice, or to just press refresh and take that time to get themselves back on track. I think what the positive is that people are looking at gap years as purposeful gap years rather than just sitting at home and watching Cash in the Attic, which is a really good place to be. But when we see that the increase in people that are taking this option, as I say, it's been driven by the people who are guiding them, but equally by, I think, the students becoming more empowered, that they feel that they can take a step away from what's considered the normal route and going straight to university. They're feeling more empowered and feel that they can make that decision to take that gap year. And I think that's a really fantastic place for those young people to be.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. You talked about language quite a bit there, I think, in terms of how people frame gap years. And you mentioned something around that idea of it kind of, maybe being considered not necessarily a kind of a waste of a year, but almost like a year lost for some people, rather than a year gained, that actually what you're gaining from that year, which of course is, as you said, if something's purposeful, that's what's happening. You're not losing a year at all. And I think your colleague Anne has sort of tried to address some of the stuff around language, hasn't she, with this idea of how we talk about gap years, good luck on your gap year, rather than some of the other things we might send to celebrate people getting results.
Absolutely. And I think this is it, Anne has a campaign at the moment which she's absolutely passionate about, and we're all absolutely behind her on this, because you go into a card shop and you see a card for good luck in university, good luck in your first job. There's nothing for good luck on your gap year. And with so many people taking that, it's still in many ways considered the default option. It's considered, well, if you don't do well, you can take a gap year, rather than the positive and, you know, potentially very successful decision to take that gap year and seize the opportunity to get yourself ahead. And is really trying to reframe the gap year in that sense. You know, getting a card onto the racks in John Lewis, getting a card onto the racks in WH Smiths and Clintons, you know, good luck on your gap year. We've actually commissioned a card. We've had one made, and we would be delighted to send this out to any of the people that might be watching this podcast who know people who are taking a gap year, who some of their students might be taking a gap year, that they actually feel that they're on level footing as to people that have elected to go to university.
I think it's so, Catherine, I think it's so interesting that you're talking really there for me, and I think for others as well, viewers. What, you know, is Catherine changing your perspective on gap years? Or maybe you were always a fan of gap years. We'd love to hear in the comment section where you sit on this subject. But you're talking really there for me, Catherine, about the psychological impact and how that then impacts the other decisions that individuals as well as families make. Because I know in the past, when I've been around conversations within my own family, and when I've had nephews, nieces, cousins that are thinking about it, and almost instantly the parents' reactions is almost like, oh, no, you need to carry on, you know. And it's almost, you know, and then sort of as the conversation unfolds, and sometimes, you know, it's down to the young person to be able to articulate, but not every young person maybe have the language that Chris spoke about around gap years to be able to articulate why they feel that this is a better decision than sort of kind of going straight into education or going straight into work maybe as well. And something else that you said, Catherine, as well, purposeful gap years. You know, this idea of just sort of kind of using it to just do nothing isn't what you're advocating for. You're basically saying use that time to experiment and explore who you are and what that would look like for you, whether you continue in education or whether you continue sort of you know, head on into the job marketplace, and what that would look like. Now, we know that for many young people, taking a gap year can feel like quite a big diversion from the typical pathways individuals take finishing their mainstream education. What would you say, Catherine, are the benefits to young people who are considering or have decided now that they want to take a gap year? And what do individuals need to know in order to have a more informed conversation around taking this gap year?
Well, I think the first thing I'd really like to do is to bust some of the myths around the gap year, because, you know, as you said, you know, particularly for parents, you know, it is quite chilling, you know, if they're in that position, you know, at the moment where, you know, maybe the head of six is saying, you know, I think a gap year might be really a positive step for your child to take. You know, as a parent myself, you know, before I came into this business, a gap year would have just not been something you know, that I would have wanted to consider for my child. You know, there's all those things like, you know, your brain's going to go to mush in that year. You're not going to be able to pick up with your studies where you've left off. You know, you're flying high, and you know, you just need to be hitting the ground running. It's, you know, what else are you going to do? You're going to be kicking around. You're going to get, you know, sort of idle hands are the devil's work. All that kind of stuff that comes into this. But the fact is that, coming back to the word purposefully, if a gap year is purposeful and there's a plan around it, it could be the best possible option that young person has. And when I talk about purposeful, I mean, you know, having a plan, knowing what you're going to do. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, I've got to have a job or I've got to do this. There are so many ways of making the year purposeful. Obviously, Yipiyap, we feel that what we do with placing our students into schools to support you know, and working, you know, very productively alongside professionals for that year, that's a super purposeful year, that they can stand in university interviews and talk about all of the skills they've developed, etc., you know, and really be able to demonstrate that really brilliantly. But equally, you know, if somebody does want to travel, you know, whilst that is the sort of very traditional view of gap years, providing that you're doing some work experience when you're out there, learning a language as you're going along, working within a team when you're, getting all of those, ticking those skills off if you're going to travel. Volunteering is a great option as well. That's super, a super way of doing it. It gives them, the young person, a really good sense of achievement and accomplishment and, giving back. That's absolutely fantastic. They feel, that gap years will develop young people into being more confident, more invigorated individuals, more independent individuals. Their skills will evolve, providing they're in this purposeful environment. Their skills will evolve, so teamwork, leadership, responsibility, communication and organisation, all those things that universities will be looking for. So again, it's a fantastic platform for them to be reapplying to universities. They're doing something completely different, and this stands them out like nothing else. I have to say, they are doing something that isn't considered the norm, but it's absolutely fantastic to be able to demonstrate that you've done something positive. It stands you out from the crowd. It's something a little bit more refreshing than just being able to say, I've got my Duke of Edinburgh, I was head boy, or, I can play the piano up to grade 8. It's something really different, and will help them in that sense. Universities and future employers really do love those gap year students because they're that little bit more mature. They're not just going in straight hot off the press from school. They've got that maturity. They've got a little bit more of a professional approach to what they're doing. And just taking a little aside here, and it's slightly outdated, so I don't want to sort of dwell too much on it, but we did, about 4 years ago, we did a survey of all of our alumni that had gone through and graduated. So they'd worked with us for a year and then graduated. 90% of those had got first-class honours degrees when they graduated. And when we asked them, do you think that taking a gap year, was part of that success? And 100% came back and said, absolutely. They all absolutely put it at the foot of the gap year that they felt so much more confident going into university and did better as a result of the year out. The other thing is that universities do really like, universities will see that gap year as a real positive because the person has taken a step out, really considered where they want to go, considered that course, and so the commitment to the course is there. And so that's really reassuring. And they're more likely, there's research that has shown that they're more likely to get better grades. So for universities, it's a real win to have those people apply.
Yeah, and of course we're talking about sort of universities there, but as you've rightly said, of course, many of the individuals that undertake a gap year or go and work for yourselves at Yipiyap may well decide to kind of continue moving straight on into work or undertaking kind of further or higher education through either through an apprenticeship or maybe through a kind of different mechanism, perhaps through their employer. So as you say, it's that kind of that language perhaps in the past has often been around the idea of a gap year being a risk, whereas actually, as you're saying, there's quite a boost it can give you in terms of potential prospects for the future, depending on what you do with the time there.
Absolutely. And it's this time of year that we're sort of saying goodbye to last year's cohort, and they're getting, over results day, we keep in touch with them to see how they're getting on. Did they get the results? Have they got into uni? And we get so many messages back at this point of the year saying, I've got my grades, I'm off to do medicine, I'm off to do dentistry, I'm off to do whatever. And I wouldn't have been able to do this without having that gap year. And that's our raison d'etre. It's really fantastic to see them, to be able to move on so successfully, when this time last year, a lot of them were racking their brains. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Oh my gosh, default option, gap year. And they really thought they were on the back foot. And it's actually, for them, it's just, we can just turn it around. Yeah. They evolve into the very best versions of themselves, and have that confidence to go forward with their next steps. So you can probably tell I'm completely about the gap year. We've seen this with, we've employed over 1,000 students over the past 12 years, and we've seen again and again how this purposeful gap year can really be the making of these young people.
Coming back, I guess, to what you were sort of saying earlier, how do you feel we maybe change this conversation then? Because, I think you alluded earlier, talked about your kind of your heads of sticks or career leads that are having those type of conversations. How do you feel maybe we get that kind of parity where, as you say, sort of apprenticeships, university, gap year are all kind of along the same sort of lines in terms of whether you're going into higher education, going into work, or taking some time out, perceived as maybe being more equal as options for young people? What needs to change, I guess?
Well, I think this is exactly what, having these conversations, really open conversations with people who are involved in this. We often get asked for comments from the media around gap years, and if what we're saying doesn't fit the narrative, it doesn't get published, because there's a certain narrative around gap years. So it is just keeping the faith with this, keeping putting it out there. As I say, we are very determined to get our good luck on the gap year cards into the mainstream shops, and we really hope that that's going to happen. But it's keeping that conversation going and really celebrating when people are moving successfully forward, and getting them to shout about that year out as well. We've got, on our website, we've got our blogs from people who are working from us, and just their general experience, why they've come on board with us, but also lots of our alumni who are so passionate about shouting about their experience. And it's just got to get into that public consciousness. When Anne first did her LinkedIn post about the card, and she just put a LinkedIn post saying, look, we're doing this, if anybody's interested in it. So many individuals, and particularly in the careers environment, came back and said, I took a gap year, it was the best thing I ever did.
I feel a TikTok video coming up, Catherine, almost, that could just explode, and then it becomes a TikTok trend almost, because that seems to be the way forward.
It would be amazing, because, as I say, for so many young people, this is the making of them.
And you're so right regarding kind of the response, I guess, that Anne got. And Anne very kindly wrote some blogs for me as well. Really, really great response from the international careers community. Lots of people basically saying, we're not really talking about this enough. I think most careers professionals were kind of reflecting and saying, yeah, you know what, I always kind of think about it as an option, and we do talk about it a little bit, but actually maybe perhaps we haven't been elevating it to that same sort of level as apprenticeships, university, and perhaps we do need to have that kind of multiple pathway parity. And how do we talk about that? And who do we bring in to talk about it? What type of speakers do we bring in? So I think really prompted a lot of thinking across the community, which was great. This brings us very nicely, I suppose, to kind of, before we run out of time on the podcast, just to really ask you, Catherine, if we've got careers professionals watching or listening to the podcast who are maybe particularly interested in finding out more about the work that Yipiyap do, or just really kind of, I suppose, challenging their own perceptions of the gap year and maybe testing their own knowledge on it, where's the best place for them to go to find out more?
Well, you can contact us anytime. We've got our fantastic website, which we're really proud of. It's got so much information for students and professionals to go on and have a look at. But the best way is obviously to pick up the phone or to get us in, and we are always we always would welcome going into schools and colleges and speaking to individuals, the careers leads there, and even speaking to the students. That's something that we find, delivering this information directly to the students themselves is just so powerful, because a lot of our regional directors that go in and deliver that message have actually gone through have been tutors themselves, so they can talk really passionately about their gap years. And
Catherine, I was just going to ask Catherine, and are these resources that you're referring to on the website, would they also work for more mature gap year folks who are thinking about maybe partway through? I just want to sort of kind of bring that in, because I know I'll probably get questions about that later, going, oh, I'm in my 30s, 40s, 50s, and I'm thinking about taking a gap year. So would those resources be available and useful for them, Catherine?
I think probably ours are more geared towards the student, the gap year, the traditional gap year student between sort of A levels and university, mainly because we provide those relatable role models. So that's the cohort that we sort of focus on. But certainly, looking more broadly at the blogs, particularly, I think the blogs that we have on our website would be very useful for anybody that wants to explore the possibility of a gap year and what it might do for them. So absolutely, yes. And we're always,
just because that's kind of something that sort of come up when we originally had the blogs from Anne, and a lot of that conversation was going on, was it actually started, I think, a sort of a further kind of dialogue around, well, actually, who are gap years for? And I think if we had more time, this would definitely be the focus for either this podcast or another podcast. So
why do we always end up by the end of the show going, oh, this is a new theme now, this is a new podcast scene that we potentially got? So I love how these ideas, and hopefully, folks, as you've listened to Catherine share her experiences and what her company does, as well as listening to myself and Chris dissecting this topic, is giving you food for thought about what that conversation can look like when you're sitting down and serving your clients, and also perhaps, you know, signposting you to different resources that you've heard Catherine talk about that are available and accessible through her website. In terms of those sort of kind of key points and key takeaways, I would say that what I'm taking away from what Catherine is sharing with us is that there is definitely value. The one area that we didn't get a chance to get into was around the socio-economical reasons, because I know that some of you will sit here and go, oh, it's a luxury. A gap year is a luxury. Not everybody can afford to have a gap year. And I can see Catherine's body language. Right, I'm going to bring you in quickly before we sort of kind of run out of time, and I'll let Chris sort of kind of wrap this up. But yeah, Catherine, what would you say to that, where somebody says, okay, look, they come from low socio-economical backgrounds, you know, getting into university is a huge deal for them because maybe they're the first of their generation or any generation to have got to university, and then this idea of taking a gap year, or maybe there's other influences, health, there could be health reasons, there could be a whole host of other reasons why somebody can't afford to. And I don't just mean financially, could also be other reasons as well they can't afford to. What would you say to that, Catherine? And we'll wrap up the podcast on that.
Well, I would certainly say, you know, the demographic of our tutors are just from very normal backgrounds, and not necessarily, you know, sort of privileged in any way. You know, they come to us and they work through their gap year. They get paid and they support themselves through their gap year, which I think is an absolutely fantastic thing to be able to do, and to understand the value of work at that stage. So, but you know, going straight to university, if it's not quite the right thing, could be the most expensive mistake that they make, because, you know, obviously paying your tuition fees and then not getting on with your course is, you know, it's a really huge financial commitment. So taking that year, working and, you know, funding yourself through that year is a really positive thing to do. And then being in a position to make the right decision as to whether it's university or, you know, apprenticeship or whatever at the end of that year. It just gives them that time. It buys them that space. And as I say, if you're working and able to fund yourself, that's, you know, that's definitely the way forward there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you've said there, because actually it really shows the complexity of all of these decisions that young people are having to make at this age, you know, in terms of thinking about, is there going to be a financial implication? Is there going to be a health implication? You know, is the perception I have of this option potentially putting me off for a particular reason that might be quite outdated? And how do we counter that? How do we challenge that? So I think, as always, it's given us a huge number of other topics to kind of explore sort of through future podcasts, which is great, exactly what it's here for. And I guess as to reiterate your message, Catherine, it's starting that conversation. So hopefully this podcast, for those of you who are listening and watching, has started that conversation or continued that conversation on gap years, and something you may want to kind of take forward in your own time. As Catherine's mentioned, if you want to get in touch with Yipiyap, find out a bit more about them, all of the resources that Catherine's mentioned will be in the description on YouTube or the episode notes on Spotify, so do check those out. But we have rapidly reached the end of the podcast, so all that's left to say really is a massive thank you to Catherine for joining us. Very thank you for your time, Catherine. Been great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been brilliant.
Wonderful. Big thank you to everybody, obviously, watching or listening, wherever you are in the career sphere. And we will see you and catch you at the next one. See you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.